You're listening to Biz-Souls, the business podcast with an edge, hosted by me, Rona and Jeffrey Hansler. Tune in for perspectives and discoveries about the changing world of business. It's time to connect to the heart, soul, and humor of how business gets done. Hi-ho, kids. It's time for another fantastic Biz-Souls podcast with me, Rona Lewis.
And me, myself, and I, Jeffrey. All the personalities are here. And we get to the heart.
Which is a little frightening.
We get to the heart and soul of business and the people that make it happen. And today, Kelley is making it happen for us.
We have Kelley Dukat. I pronounce it right. Yay. With us today. Kelley and I met when I was doing a seminar in San Diego. And I thought what she did was absolutely fascinating. And Kelley, I'm going to read your official introduction. We are thrilled to have Kelley with us today. She is a dynamic freelancer based in the United States. And we say that because she is a self-proclaimed nomad living a life as a house and pest sitter. Can I say that again? Pet sitter as opposed to pest sitter for the past few years, although they can be pests. Kelley's talents span across writing, event planning, guest experiences, which encompass retail and sales, as well as photography. With a journalism degree from the University of Colorado at Boulder, Kelley's journey into entrepreneurship and storytelling has been nothing short of remarkable. From exploring all 50 states within the next 3 years to sharing her insights on travel, finance, and San Diego's hidden gems, Kelley's adventures are a testament to the boundless possibilities of a life worth living.
Excellent. Well done. And Kelley's cat sitting, right?
Yes, I'm cat sitting in Murrieta, Temecula area, just north of San Diego.
Very good. And the cats are locked out because they're cats with loud voices, right?
They make noise.
One of them does.
Excellent. So do I get to start off with my favorite question?
Go ahead.
Okay. So what did you want to be when you grew up? And basically how'd you get here? How'd you arrive here? Was it a straight journey? Is it back and forth all over the place?
Tell us everything in a minute and a half.
Right.
Okay,
all right, and go.
I'm not sure that I remember exactly what I wanted to be as a small kid, but I know by about 7th grade or so that I wanted to be a journalist, and I told everyone that, and they said, "Oh, you'll change your mind like 3 or 4 times," and I didn't, and I went through with it and became a journalist. So, it's kind of from that perspective, I majored in journalism, knew I wanted to do it, made sure that writing was always a part of my life. And I've definitely had, since I met Rona, actually, I'm an event planner too as well. So that's how I was there, kind of being the event planner on-site person for the seminar that she was teaching. So I kind of have 2 loves now, and they fight for the time because I love both. I love event planning and writing, and then I've thrown in, as you said, all those other things in there. So that's definitely, kind of the journey's not always been a straight line, not always, can sometimes ups and downs, but it's definitely there. And I like to do a bunch of different things. I don't like to be bored.
No kidding.
Who does?
No kidding.
Who does? Well, what I saw was, everything was done to the nines when you were in charge. And once the seminar got started, you were able to, oversee as well as give yourself a chance to write. So I'm like, that's really the best of both worlds right there.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the thing. You can be able to write from anywhere. So I got to finish up 2 stories when I get off this podcast too, as well. So it just, it goes from there. So
that's fantastic. When I grew up, I wanted to be a journalist and a writer too. So I'm just a journalist and writer and waiting. So I'm waiting for something to happen. I don't know.
Still waiting. We're waiting.
So I'm sorry.
No, so, which did you really start with and find that it was easier to add as you kind of went along to alleviate boredom, I guess?
Right. I definitely started on the journalism editing path. My first job in San Diego was with a mortgage trade magazine, which is now defunct, as many printed publications are. But that's kind of, and it was at that job that we had a couple of events that we needed planned too. And so then it just kind of fell onto me to be able to do that. And then I actually went back to San Diego State and went to their extended studies college and took some classes in event planning, and kind of worked from there. And then I just fell into the nonprofit niche from there. And once you're a nonprofit event planner, you kind of can't get out because you have a special skill set that, a wedding planner doesn't have, or, things like that, because nonprofits have all sorts of moving parts and they have to be fundraising events. So you don't just get given $1 million budget to get to throw an event. You got to do like a 5-star event on like a 2-star budget. So I kind of just fell into that from there. And then, what I've always liked organizing. So when I said I was going to go that route, people were like, oh, well, you've always organized everything. So, some of my friends will tell you they never go anywhere unless I plan it. But that's just the way it is. And now I have the fortunate ability to be able to write about my travels through the publication that I write for called Wealth of Geeks. So it's kind of it's an interesting way to describe Wealth of Geeks, but it's basically we want to be a site where you geek out about certain things: travel, video games, entertainment, TV, all those kind of things. So people write about all sorts of those kind of topics. And then it started, kind of the wealth part came from, it started kind of as a finance sort of publication: how to make more money, how to be successful.
So is it sort of like a mini Huffington Post where people can throw stuff in there?
No, I mean, we do have our own team of like freelance writers, so it's not necessarily, it just doesn't go to contributors out in the open, but there's people, all over the experts. We actually didn't have a travel section when I started. I wrote like news articles on side hustles, things like that. But then we're really developing our travel section too as well. So everybody kind of writes, like I write a lot of articles about San Diego and Oregon and the places that I've been a lot too as well.
So there are a lot of bloggers or influencers on, Facebook, YouTube. So they're usually carrying a camera with them and they're videoing as well. Now, do you video as well, or do you just go and write about the experience?
Typically, my friends and family would say I video just on my own personal Facebook page, kind of, but I haven't used it in any kind of influencer blogger role. That is definitely something I want to add into. Okay. Besides, I want to get into podcasting and YouTube and video vlogging and all sorts of things like that. I just haven't. I'm not of the generation, obviously that does that as easily, because I don't fit as a millennial or someone that's come up with social media my whole life. So I haven't gotten into that, but I definitely want to. I've done it on like kind of a personal level. Mostly I just write about, the certain experience I've written about, personal trips that I've taken, but also just general, how to get to these places, what's the top place to see in this city, things like that.
Have you tried any, sorry, Rona, I've got a series of questions. Have you done any like the big events? Have you gone to Burning Man? Have you gone to, do you like, I mean, that you're financing yourself on these trips, right? So
for the most part, I do have some event planning, like other contract clients that send me to destinations. Usually I'm too busy working to be able to see. I have to go on site, stay in a hotel with the group that I'm supporting, but sometimes I get to see places along there, or I might say, let me explore a couple days after. So my flight home is funded because they have to send me home, but I just delayed, the return a little bit. But most of the time, yeah, most of the time they're self-funded, or it's a place I'm already going anyway. So then I kind of am able to pay for that trip by writing about it.
So, are you looking for Wealth of Geeks to make its own money eventually?
Well, they definitely make their own. I mean, I don't know all about the finance, but they definitely make their own money, and they are able to pay us, pretty good rates for freelancing. So yeah, it's not definitely from that perspective. And then the more people that read the pieces, then they reach out to you and they can sometimes offer you like a hosted trip. Hey, we want you to come write about this particular hotel or this particular place. So that's definitely what I'm trying to build up to in my travel writing portfolio. It really is a dream because I always said I wanted to be a travel writer. I think when I was younger, I wanted to be a National Geographic writer and go around, like, I clearly haven't gotten to that far, but in my own little piece of it, my own way, I'm making that dream happen.
That's awesome. So what made you decide? I mean, you were working for a company that unfortunately went out of business. Is that the reason that you just decided to become freelance, or what was there a deciding factor of I'm staying in corporate versus going out on my own?
Well, actually, that job was a long time ago, so it was not, the two didn't correlate. I actually left to start my event planning career and spent my time in a lot of different nonprofits, and then the magazine went under sometime during that process. It really just, as we know, 2020 hit and changed everybody's world and everybody's perspective. And being an event planner during a pandemic is really not a good career choice, because you're all of a sudden, all the events you plan and all the gathering, if you can't gather, then I have nothing to plan. Right. So you kind of just, and we know California is a very expensive place to live. And so I had kind of read about house and pet sitting, and I said, well, how can I reduce my living expenses and not have the responsibility anymore? Also, another thing happened is I had my own pets for a very long time, and they all passed away, so they were able to give me the freedom to be able to get rid of all those responsibilities of I mean, I take care of other people's houses, but don't have, I don't have to pay for them. So it just kind of that kind of necessitated that. So I've kind of been on and off freelancer, and like, I'm totally open. I sometimes people call me about jobs or, things like that. We interview or things like that. So I'm open to going back to the normal, but I really love the freedom of the freelance kind of life, but it can be tough too, as well. So, just as far as, it's when you're applying for a loan or a credit card or anything like that, or when someone asks, well, what's your income? Well, some months it's up here and some months it's down here. So they don't understand it. They're like, well, I want to see your W-2. And I'm like, well, I don't get a W-2 for most of my work. So, it's kind of just, it's a world that I think people should start to understand. I think the funniest thing was when my car insurance company said, well, we need a physical address where your car is going to be every night. And I just kind of laughed and said, well, my car is wherever I'm at. So they were like, what? And they didn't understand, well, what about your home? And I'm like, well, I don't have one. So, you kind of just have to understand that. I mean, I use a friend's address when someone needs an actual physical address, but it's sort of just, it's funny how you kind of have to fight that mantra that people don't fully understand it yet. It's becoming more, but definitely sometimes you get kind of flabbergasted looks or even, I imagine they're looking at me that way if I'm on a phone call. So.
Well, people are used to living life a certain way. And I think especially because of the pandemic, we are finding people are getting much more creative in terms of how they work, where they work, if they work, all those things. So do you have clients that are constant in your various things, just to kind of keep, something going?
Right. It really just depends. I do have some and definitely would like more. I mean, Wealth of Geeks is
Don't
pretty
we
steady.
all?
Yes, Wealth of Geeks is pretty steady because I've been freelancing for them for 2 years now. Right. But I think otherwise, like on the event planning side, yes and no. There's certainly some. I mean, AMA is one of them, but I work through a website that is for freelancers and contractors, and so jobs are put in there, and then you can bid on them from there. And so that's how I've made the connection with certain areas as well. And then I do have some other gigs that I do, as far as that can be to bring in the steady. But yeah, like I said, it can be a struggle sometimes, for sure, but you have to love what you do. And I think at the end of the day, like, just, I had 2 articles that published on Wealth of Geeks website yesterday, and it's just so satisfying to be able to go, okay, now it's time to go into my social media and share them. But then, the more people that see them, and so it's great to see, the fruits of my efforts, so to speak.
Nice.
So
you have to do your own marketing for them.
No, I mean, they put it out too as well on the site, but
yes,
it never hurts to share, in the places. And then if I've interviewed like the Convention Visitors Bureau or the Visitors Authority, then they share it on there. And so it can just get through, the realms of the sharing world in there. So
nice.
Good. Were there any real surprises that were just like, if I'd known this, I never would have done this? Or is it just been coming along?
I mean, it really depends. Sometimes, in the house and pet sitting world, you're going into someone else's house who you usually have not met. We've usually just had a video chat or a phone call beforehand, but I haven't met them before because you work through an app or a website. It's called Trusted House Sitters. So there's several out there. There's a bunch that do that. And I think sometimes when I've encountered maybe an overwhelming situation that didn't come across the way it was supposed to, or a dog that maybe, or a cat, but it's usually a dog, an animal that maybe has a behavior that you weren't aware of, and it's just a struggle. I did one in November where the dog was just way too much for me, and I was kind of stuck. It was a Thanksgiving sit, and it's just like, I mean, the person's out of town, and it's just sort of, and then his house wasn't what I was expected, and then his cat was missing when I got there. It wasn't my fault, but it all trickled down.
Yeah.
So that so those sort of things on that side. As far as the freelance career, sometimes, I mean, people always ask me like, well, I can't believe you just move from place to place. Doesn't that get exhausting? Doesn't that get, and I'm like, well, now I have it down to a science, but I admit that sometimes you're like, oh, it'd be nice to just have my stuff in a place. And a couple times during the last couple of years, I have, I spent some extended time on the Oregon coast. My family has a house there. And then I met a person from a house sit who had another house there. So I kind of didn't do regular house and pet sitting and just kind of lived on the Oregon coast for several months. And I was like, wow, I'm actually putting stuff in a closet or in drawers, and it hadn't been something that I had done for a couple of years. So it was good to be able to come back to that and to be able to do that. And so sometimes it's usually just the reactions of other people, and you just kind of have to ignore them or just, turn it around to a positive.
Right.
They may come across with their comment as negative, and then you have to turn it around and say, well, but I get to do this,
Right.
And so I'm used to just having everything in a suitcase now.
Yeah.
So.
Sure. Well, and there was a movie that was out. I think I can't remember it. I think it was a Coen Brothers movie with, I can't remember who starred in it. She used to star in Fargo, the movie Fargo. But anyway, it was about, nomads who lived off the land sort of thing. They were like off the grid. So you're not exactly off the grid, but you're living off the land, sort of.
Well, right. I saw that movie. I don't remember the name of it, but I saw that movie. My friend and I watched it, and because I remember I had to do a little rigging of my computer to hook up to her TV to get it on streaming. But yeah, I'm definitely not like that, because I'm not, going around in a beat up van or anything like that and trying to get jobs in different places. And bless her heart though, because I mean, she had to do some of the jobs that probably most people don't want, like cleaning up after people who don't know how to behave in a national park, things like that. So, just kind of that sort of perspective. So when people hear nomad, they think automatically that, I'm going around the world and all this stuff, but mostly I've kind of been home based here on the West Coast. But, I always say I live out of my car, but not in it, because my car is kind of rigged. It has everything in it that I need, where I could just pull over and camp. I mean, I usually use, you have to think of some things as a single woman too, as well, but reputable campgrounds, things like that. But I'd be prepared that if I had to stop anywhere, that I could do that.
Right.
That's awesome.
Can I switch to writing? So has the writing changed from what? So you have an idea as a freelance writer, or do you have to shift for every different publication and every different venue?
That's a really good question. So when I started, obviously I worked for a publication where I did a few pieces for the magazine, but most of the time I was editing our contributing writers' works, because it was a trade magazine on a skill that I wouldn't have had. So we had to rely on people that were kind of the experts, kind of like AMA relies on people like Rona to teach, seminars.
And Jeffrey works.
Oh, okay. Jeffrey as well. So, but I think for Wealth of Geeks is kind of been primary, my only freelance at the moment, because I can do a lot of work for them. So they come up with, I mean, every place has writers guidelines, writers contributor guidelines, or pitching guidelines. So for Wealth of Geeks, I kind of understand that model, and so I can pitch an article in there. But yeah, you do a lot of times have to focus it to another. Since they're an online publication, certain things, paragraphs have to be shorter. You need to be able to link to outside things, whereas when you write for a printed publication, people are just going to read. There's a different kind of qualification, so you definitely have to do that. And then to answer your question on how my writing shifted, definitely the way that journalism is done now is not the way that I was even trained to do journalism, because that was in the 90s when they still had, late 90s, but still had a lot of printed publication. And so now in fact, my degree from the University of Colorado doesn't exist anymore. And my school that I went to was called the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. And now they are called the School of New Media or something like that, because there's, there's our college of something. I don't know what they even call themselves anymore, so if I get the publications, but it's totally changed in that realm, because you got to move towards I'm still old school enough that I wrote actual hard copy for actual printed publications until like the last 5-10 years.
We're familiar with those.
Yes.
Yeah, most people are not. My 20-something niece is kind of like, what? There was time before
I get that.
I'm like, yeah, I used to actually have to like find a payphone to make a call, and then they look.
Well, and people don't have the bandwidth anymore to read for that long. Even on social media, I read some of these. It's a tome, for goodness sake, and I'm like, you're on Instagram or what? It's like no one's going to read this, and I'm scrolling and I'm bored, and I have more than a gnat's worth of patience. Not that much, but it's just too long, and it's too long.
Well, and I will say that the one thing about writing the kind of travel articles that I'm writing now is we're supposed to put our personality in there, and then sometimes we actually write in first person, and that's kind of the way I was trained to do journalism.
You never do that, right?
It's always third person, and you have to interview someone. So it's nice to be able to put kind of that personal experience in there, or we use first person plural, meaning we. So we're, that's if you've been to the place. If I'm writing about a place, I've written a couple articles.
Or if you're the queen. That's
me. Yeah. So it's that's kind of it took me a little bit to be like, oh, wait, I am the expert in this case, but I can't quote myself. So you just write about your experiences. And if I haven't been to a place or I need a quote, then I find someone that has been to that place and then kind of write more in the traditional, third person with a quote.
Right. Now I got a very personal question. How'd you feel about Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas? Hunter S. Thompson. Did you read that?
I haven't read that.
Oh my God.
I know, but I
saw the movie.
Okay.
I have written a Gonzo piece that hasn't been published yet, but I have, and I read a couple of his to kind of get inspiration from that, because like I said, again, from the old school versions, like I have to put myself right in that action and then write about it. But it was really enjoyable, and my writing has changed in some of those ways because I've done a lot of creative writing too. Well, I'm working on some personal essays, and I have a couple of books inside me somewhere that I just need to find the time to put together. And so I mean, strictly nonfiction. I don't know how to write fiction. I can't make stuff up. I just write about the real world. But I think some of those things, if they ever get to the light of day, we're outside of my computer or my friends and family circle. There's some really good, so I've changed that too as well, because I was only trained to be like, you're writing about a place and you got to get quotes and all that stuff.
Very, very good.
So is there, knowing what you know now, let me put it this way, from your experience, is there anything you would have done differently?
Well, yes, I think, just in the interest of all honesty, I think sometimes you do it and you think I would say you would want to make sure that you're completely, maybe more financially sound than I was when I did it. I think certainly, because you don't know how long it might be before you, or make sure you've got the steady income coming in. So at least that it can support that on there. And definitely, I don't know if I was fully prepared, but I guess I was a little bit, for the kickback you get from certain people in your life. So who don't understand it, or just, and then you could just kind of have to deal with it. And it may be somebody really close to you, someone you love, parent, sibling, best friend, and they don't understand it. And then you're faced with the reality of, well, if this person's not going to support my choice, how active can I have this person in my life? And that's hard when you think about a family member or a really close friend, to be able to do that. And so I think probably, I still think it was the right decision at the time, but it can be, like I said, it can definitely be a struggle at times, and you got to be prepared for how to deal with that.
Absolutely.
Do you think you would ever look for a place to settle down, even if it's just a studio apartment, or what do they call them, bachelors here? I don't know what they call them on this side of
yeah,
but studio.
I certainly wouldn't rule it out. Definitely, for sure. If there was a a gig that kept me in one particular place. I mean, my ultimate goal is to just be full-time traveling and being on more of the event planning roles where you have to go and support a group. So therefore it's like, do you justify paying rent if you're only in that place 1 week a month, or something like that. So I think it would depend. But yeah, I got really lucky with those situations on the Oregon coast, and then one in San Diego where I lived in basically a studio garage apartment at my friend's, and was able to kind of do that too. So I think it just really depends on the situation and the location, and there are some places that I've fallen in love with outside of, I mean, I basically lived on the East Coast, Colorado and California, with little stunts in Mexico and Oregon for a few months at a time. But there are some places that I've traveled to that I've opened up the world of possibilities to maybe spend some more time there in the future.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
That's fantastic.
So what would you recommend? What sort of tips would you give to people who want to try this lifestyle? And you had mentioned a website, trusted house sitters, or is there anything else that you can share?
Well,
Tips and tricks.
if they're going to be a house and pet sitter, they need to like animals, period. And you need to understand that the way that Trusted House Sitters is advertising now is not really the way that most of us longtime sitters see it. They're advertising as, oh, travel the world and stay for free. Well, that's fine, but the animal care is really important too. So it is an exchange. So it's a free place to stay, and with having an animal buddy. So you just need to understand that you can't be like gone. I mean, obviously it's different with a cat. If I want to explore a place for 8 to 10 hours a day, then I'm going to look for a cat only sit. But you need to understand that that's really important too. And you're in someone's home. So there's definitely the upkeep, but the advantage is I always say I don't have to be in a noisy hotel with loud parties going on and thin walls. I get my own place with a kitchen and a bathroom and stuff like that. So I think be prepared to be an animal lover, for one, if you're going to go that route, and then be prepared for the unexpected. You just have to be able to, you could get in and you've never met, most of the time I haven't met the animal in person before, maybe sometimes on a video chat, but that's not the same thing waving to a dog from the screen who's, so
Dog's going, hey, what is this, TV?
Yeah. So you just have to be prepared for kind of that. And then I've been relatively lucky that there's a double review system. So I've been very lucky that I have, over 65-star reviews, and I've given my houses that as well. But sometimes I've certainly seen in certain social media groups that other people haven't been as lucky. So just be prepared for the adversity there. And then also, as I mentioned before, the kickback you might get from people in your life that don't understand it. So be prepared for how you want to handle that, or if you can handle that, because I certainly know some people would be like, well, if so-and-so in my life was against this, I wouldn't be able to do it. And most people who know me know that, especially once I hit 40, I decided I don't really care what other people think anymore. I mean, obviously you want to have a good business reputation. I want to make sure when I'm doing a job that I have that. But as far as like other stuff, I mean, it's fine. You can have your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion, but it's just kind of, I'm going to go this way, and it's okay to do an alternative way, certainly from that. And then I think just, be prepared that if, obviously there are some people that only do it occasionally, the house and pet sitting. So maybe start that way would be, I recommend try doing a couple that are in your, like you can find some all around San Diego or LA or, big areas. Maybe just try doing one for a weekend or a date or two and see how you like it. It not necessarily going the full on back to back, or the way that I do it. So, I don't have a home to go to on a gap night, or I have arrangements, but certain things. But those sort of kind of mentality on there, you have to be able to expect the unexpected.
Well, Jeffrey, if Riley comes with you to Australia, you know who to call to watch the cats.
Exactly. And I do have a few recommendations. How can people get hold of you though, Kelley?
Certainly. I mean, so on Instagram, it's just Kelley Dukat. That's Kelley, because my parents were fun. Well, they can see it on the screen, I guess, if they're watching, and then certainly that's probably the easiest way, just because my Instagram is open and free. I also have my photography at KD Scenic Photographs. So I have 2 Instagram pages as far as that goes. So that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of that. I think if you Google me, there's lots of things that pop up. So, Facebook too as well. My Facebook's private, but I certainly see the messages if someone, wants to message that way would probably be the easiest. I wish I could say I was a TikToker, but I've never used it. So
if somebody is looking in general for a pet sitter, where would you recommend they go? Is there a website?
So there are, a lot of people use Rover if they just want a drop-in service, someone coming in and out. Trusted House Sitters is a membership based. So both the homeowner and the sitter, and there's different levels of memberships that they purchase on there. And so you just have to decide if you want to do that. But it's only like $130 a year and haven't paid rent in 3 years. So it's kind of those sort of thing. And then I've heard a lot of homeowners say, well, I tried to find a Rover sitter that would come and spend, overnight, especially with a dog when they want someone around them more often. And they're like, it's $60 a night. And if I'm going away for a week, $60 a night times whatever, when you can get a house sitter to come in and do an exchange. So I guess it depends on how, but some people don't like the idea of someone staying in their house too. But if you are, then, utilizing one of those apps, there's House Sitters America. There's one based for every continent. I've only done house sits in the US, 9 states so far, 9 states in DC, but that as far as that goes. So that would be one way. Other than that, I think most people use Rover or just word of mouth, maybe just using social media on there. There are some sites on there as well.
Excellent.
This has been, it's a fascinating lifestyle, and I love that you can do more than one thing at once. So you are keeping our loving creatures happy, as well as getting your writing mojo out there. So
definitely you have to. You have to be diversified, because you never know when one stream is going to end. So
exactly. Excellent. Oh, congratulations for all your courage too. That's amazing to do that.
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of fun. It's that childlike spirit of adventure, which I love. So
yeah, it can be a lot of fun. There can be challenges too, but luckily I like being challenged. So
Jeffrey owns his house. There's a lot of challenges with that. I rent, so there's a challenge here. There's a challenge no matter what lifestyle you choose, I think. So anyway,
I own my house. I didn't know that. Holy mackerel! That's news to me.
Yay! That's fantastic.
That's great. I thought the government owned it.
That's right. Well, there you go. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Kelley, for being with us. Thanks, Jeffrey, for allowing me to go remote this time.
That was great. This is a great trial. This is wonderful with a wonderful guest.
Yes, this has
Thank you for having me so much. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Anyway, thank you for everyone who is watching and listening out there in podcast land. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler.
And this has been Biz-Souls. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Biz-Souls podcast with your hosts, Rona Lewis and Jeffrey Hansler. Did you have fun? Subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Talk to you next week.